אנחנו נלמד מתוך שיעור תעש עם הרבש.
We will learn from a test lesson with Rabash. We will read from the study of the 10 Sefirot, Volume 2, Part 5.
אור פנימי, אות ל"ה.
We are in the inner lights, item 35. We'll begin from the paragraph not mati in keter. Starting from, you already know that these vessels of the second expansion. And before we enter the lesson with Rabash, we'll read item 35 together. Item 35. You already know, not mati. We must thoroughly explain the meaning of mati and not mati. It is said that in the beginning, the light comes in keter, and all 9 lights are contained in it. Afterwards, it returns to being not mati. When the light that reaches keter exits it once more, but the 9 other lights remain in keter, since keter has the power to tolerate them. In that state, when the light is not mati in the keter extends the 9 lights to chokhmah face to face and places them in chokhmah. At that time, chokhmah turns her interior after receiving the 9 lights and shines to binah face to face. It is only illumination, but she still does not give her the 7 lights. Let's enter the lesson.
When we say the vessel of keter, we already get confused. Why? He teaches there that there was phase 4 there, the light of keter. The first light in the vessel of Malchut emerged in us. What is the vessel of Malchut? That there was phase 4 there. The light of keter in the vessel of keter, he says, there was not yet light. From what perspective? That afterwards, when Malchut rose to Zeranpin, then the level of Chokhmah was shining. So it was the light of Chokhmah in the vessel of keter. It turns out that Chokhmah is not yet called a vessel, that keter is not yet called a vessel. It has yud at least, but does not have light. It turns out that at the end, when I say the vessel of keter, it means that it was refined to the coarseness of the root. What light was shining in the vessel of keter? The light of Malchut. And afterwards, when it told the vessel of keter to also be refined, there's no light at all in the vessel of keter. So the level of keter is called an empty vessel. Now, which vessel of keter am I talking about? It implies that keter that remained from the vessels of tamim, only what? There was still light from the lower degree, is where we got confused. We learn that Parzuf Ab, took the empty vessels of Parzuf Galgalta. Therefore, when I say expanding in keter, which vessel am I talking about? Either I'm talking about keter of Parzuf Ab, and here he's not talking about keter of Parzuf Ab. Where's the Rosh of Ab? He's not talking about it at all. When we speak about expanding and not expanding, the departure of the light is only in the guf. It turns out that the Ari here is not talking about the Rosh of Ab at all. What is he talking about? About the coupling that was in the Rosh of Galgalta and needed to expand the guf of Galgalta, which we call the guf of Galgalta, named after Ab, that he took the vessels. What am I confused about? It is Parzuf Ab, and we are talking about the vessels of the guf of Galgalta from which the light departed. Now, when he tells us that when we have Chokhmah, Binah, Zeran, Pin, Malchut that were left within Parzuf Galgalta when the light departed, now when he tells us that there are vessels of Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, Zeran, Pin, from which the light departed. So now he says that Parzuf Galgalta first emerged on coarseness of phase 4. There was a level of Keter there. So the light was shining in the vessel. On the contrary, light was mixed with the vessel. It was not called a vessel. What happens afterwards? Through the clash of the inner and surrounding lights, then the Parzuf Galgalta, the level of Tamim, the level of Keter was refined from phase 4 to phase 3. Now, regarding the Tamim, we consider 10 Sefirot. When I say that Malchut was emptied, the question arises, was only Malchut emptied, or from all the levels, from the entire Keter, from all the 10 Sefirot, did the light depart? We learn that from all the 10 Sefirot, the light departed. So the Ari asks, why do I say only Malchut was emptied? Since afterwards a coupling was made on phase 3 called Malchut rose to Zeranpin. Then Keter to Zeranpin was filled in a smaller light. This is not yet considered, he says, an empty vessel. Afterwards, when phase 3 was also refined, and it was shining at the level of Binah, then Zeranpin too has no pit, it has no light. Therefore, it also considered as a vessel of Keter, Chokhmah, and Binah.
שמרת לחוכמה, גם פניית קומה, וגם נתמר לכאלה רגלים, הייתה כתר חוכמה. היילם אור זרם במלכות. ואחר כך נזדח גם כפני הלב, אומר קומת איבי דקטר, שיש לה כור המלט, היו רמל בכאלה דקטר. ואחר כך נזדח גם המלט. אז עכשיו כדדיקט ואני שמור. עכשיו. למדן כתר שנזדחר.
When Keter was refined, may be the record from the light of Malchut, the coarseness of the root. And afterwards, when we learn that light came to the vessel of Keter, so I consider that vessel by the name of Tamim. It has phase 4/3, and I do not consider it as Malchut, only Keter. Where was the Keter built from? It is a bit strange. So I say, Keter had Tamim. Where? On the first degree, in the first state. And then they came to the light of Nefesh, to the coarseness of root, not Malchut. I consider the upper quality. Why did Keter have the upper quality? It had phase 4. We learned in part 4 that first there was a refinement. There was the clash of the inner and surrounding in Parzuf Galgalta. And there was a refinement of the screen until the screen rose to the Rosh. And what are you asking? In the Rosh, its records rise. And since the last phase is lost, the surrounding light weakened the screen. Therefore, the Rosh of Galgalta, there is no phase 4/3. Who raised it to the Rosh of Galgalta? We learned it was the screen of the Tabul. The screen of the Tabul rose to the Rosh of Galgalta with all its records. We learned there is a novel there, that the screen of the Tabul was incorporated in the coarseness of Malchut of the Rosh, called below upward, that it itself can draw light, and a coupling by striking was made. And Malchut is called not the coupling Malchut, but the one that makes a coupling by striking. Afterwards, we learned that the Rosh of Galgalta made a coupling, phase 4/3. So the main coarseness of the screen of the Tabul, which already has the ability to receive, which is the quality of Guf and no Rosh, would descend downward to its place. But it did not descend to the place of the Tabul to place of phase 4. Or phase 4 did not come into being, only phase 3. It is still lacking. And we learned that this light filled the empty vessels of Parzuf Galgalta. And afterwards we learned that this is called the inner Ab. What is inner? This Ab, phase 3/4, is found in the inner part of the vessels of Galgalta. Afterwards, we learned that the screen of the Tabul, which rose upward, was incorporated in Malchut of Rosh, which returned to being below after the coupling by striking that was on phase 3/4 in Rosh of Galgalta, and descended to the Chazeh. It awakens by itself its coarseness from below upward and draws a light like Malchut of the Rosh, which is called the coupling of Malchut. From Chazeh to Peh, a Rosh of Ab emerged. From the Chazeh downward, Guf of Ab emerged. This is what we learned here. About this I asked earlier. We are missing altogether that he does not speak about Rosh of Ab. We need to learn. First, Rosh of Ab emerged, then Guf of Ab, Tamim of Ab. And then the Tamim of Ab need to be refined, and then Nekudot of Ab, as we always learn. Here he says that empty vessels remained, meaning from Peh downward they remained. If so, which vessels is he talking about? That vessels past the Ab. When do I speak about them? Either I speak about them from before Ab emerged at all, and so he says immediately that the vessels will pass even before Ab emerges. Look at page 319. You already know that these vessels of the second expansion are the same empty vessels that remained after the first expansion. Also, the order of making of these vessels have been explained in the Ari's words above. First, Malchut was made. Why? Since she was the first to be emptied of her light. Afterwards, the vessel of Zeranpin was emptied from its light. The vessel of Zeranpin was made. Then, when the vessel of Binah was emptied, the vessel of Binah was made, etc. The reason for this is that the vessels were made. Here we need to speak about the recognition of the vessels, of the coarse light that remains below, which did not rise and depart with the direct light, with the abundance, as the Ari said above. Hence, each and every vessel was made with a departure of light within it. Since then, the coarse light remained below and became a vessel. You find that the vessels we arranged from the time they were made, one above the other, first Malchut first, Zeranpin topper, Binah topper, up to the vessel of Keter above them all. By this you know that here too the second expansion in Patzuf Ab, even before the lights expanded, the vessels are already arranged to stand from above downward. Keter on top and Malchut at the bottom, meaning as they emerged in the first expansion. The vessels one after the other. What is written here? As they emerged in the first expansion, the vessels one after the other. That is, after the departure. Thus, when the lights expanded and emerged from the coupling of the vessel of the above-mentioned Keter Chokhmah, while those Sefirot on an equal level close to Keter, they have found the vessel of Keter suited for them, standing ready for them. Only the vessels of the Guf of Galgalta, and where was the coupling of the Rosh of Galgalta? About Rosh of Ab does not speak here at all. It turns out that all the refinements from everything we learn from phase 3 of Ab. How it was. What we learned is this question, that there was a coupling in Rosh of Galgalta, in Hay, and it filled vessels in the inner part of the Guf of Galgalta. And afterwards we learned that Rosh of Ab emerges, and the Guf of Ab, or at the tabu of the Guf of Ab, there was a clash of inner and surrounding, and then there was the order of refinement of Tamim and Nekudot. And here he speaks about the empty vessels that passed. He does not speak about Rosh of Ab at all. And he does not say that we are speaking about the Rosh of Galgalta either. He only speaks about the vessels of Galgalta that passed the Patzuf Ab. And what are we missing? He should have said here that the Guf of Galgalta passed to the Guf of Ab. This is difficult for us. Why? We learned this is the order of the clothing, that Rosh of Galgalta, Ab clothes, Chagat of Galgalta, from Chazeh to the Peh we learned, and the Guf clothes Chazeh of Tabu of Galgalta. If we are missing this order in what he tells us, And when we learn about the clash of inner and surrounding, this already was in Partzuf Ab and not Partzuf Galgalta. There we were not inside, not from what happened. He does not speak about it. We learned that in Partzuf Ab, at its tabu, there was a clash of inner and surrounding, what we learned. There emerged Tamim, Nekudot, the level of Keter, the level of Chokhmah, Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, and here this is missing. He does not elaborate. We learn about the clash of the inner and surrounding, that the surrounding light comes and says, receive more. But at that time, when it is not yet received, what do you mean receive more? It was still the inner part of Galgalta and it was not revealed. Therefore, there must be a revelation of phase 4/3 in the Rosh of Ab. Afterwards, phase 4/3 revealed in the Guf of Ab. Up to here, more I do not want to receive. It turns out, where did it stand, phase 4/3? In the Rosh, the Tabur of Ab. It says receive more, but not yet finished receiving phase 4/3, what it means to receive more. Still haven't received yet. We always learn, by way of an allegory, I can say, the light is nullified like a candle before the torch. If I say phase 4/3, it should only be phase 4/3. Who makes a coupling on phase 4/3? Rosh of Galgalta. So it teaches that one must demand phase 4/3 alone. Who made phase 4/3? The Rosh of Galgalta, which has coarseness of phase 4, made a coupling on phase 4 of Hitlapshut, and teaches a Rosh of the same degree must be the Rosh of his own degree, that the quality of the potential, that it is no more than phase 4 of Hitlapshut. It does not have coarseness of phase 4. And when was this? After it made a coupling of the Chazeh from Chazeh of the Peh, the Rosh of Ab emerged. Why is it not enough that there was a coupling in the Rosh of Galgalta on phase 4/3 and it is done? Ab emerged. Necessarily the empty vessels of Partzuf Galgalta. So he teaches two things. One is a rule, and afterwards we will discuss about understanding. He says, since Tabu of Galgalta, which rose upward during the refinement of Rosh of Galgalta, was incorporated in the quality of Rosh. Since it was incorporated in the quality of Rosh, it must reveal in Rosh. Was incorporated. It turns out that we are now speaking about the screen of Tabu, which is the essence, and rose upward because it had no screen to receive. The light that shines from above shines specifically on the coarseness of phase 4, and this one does not have the surrounding nullified it. This screen has nothing to receive. So it does not use any coarseness and returns to its root as before it emerged. That's one thing. Furthermore, we learn that the screen of the Tabu, which rose upward, was incorporated with other records that passed over it. 3. That it was incorporated in the coarseness of from below upward. Here is a point to think about. What is it like? As in the light of Galgalta, there is a quality of Malchut of the Rosh that draws the light and makes a coupling by striking, although it is a screen of Tabu. Although it's a screen of the Guf, it's a screen only on the Guf regarding phase 4. But what was incorporated regarding phase 3 This is something new. It comes and tells us, what did the surrounding light gain by nullifying its screen, since it wants to shine? On the contrary, now there is less than before. Before there was shining, Tabul was taking from the goof, and now the goof does not receive. He says, no, before the screen of the Tabul was called concluding Malchut. The light does not go further. We will discuss in one subject. In contrast, now that the screen of Tabul rose again through the refinement and was incorporated once more, and now the screen of Tabul was incorporated in the screen of the Osh, this Malchut that descended downward from the Chazeh is no longer called Malchut. That concludes the degree, but rather the coupling Malchut. It draws the light in potential, and from it downward there was already a goof. It turns out that the Malchut, which before was called the concluding Malchut, is now called the coupling Malchut, from which downward it receives light. I speak about one subject. I am this. I will gain that which before was saying I do not want to receive anymore. Who? The Malchut of the Tabul, which now stands at the Chazeh. What do I say now? I do want to receive on phase 3.
אני כן רוצה לקבל הבחנה ג'.
נעבור לחלק הבא של השיעור, לימוד